The late afternoon sun painted the cul-de-sac in warm hues of gold and amber, the kind of quiet suburban peace that made the neighborhood seem picture perfect. Marcus Hayes stood in his driveway, unloading brown grocery bags from the trunk of his dark sedan. He moved with the unhurried confidence of a man who had done this routine countless times before: milk, vegetables, a loaf of bread, carefully stacked into his arms. He'd just returned from the local store, nodding politely to a neighbor who waved from across the street. But that peace shattered with the sudden growl of tires on asphalt. A white SUV rounded the corner and rolled to a stop right in front of Marcus's driveway, cutting off his path to the garage. The vehicle was spotless, but something about it felt staged, like a prop in a low-budget film. Its windows were tinted too dark, and slapped onto its side was a decal that read in bold block letters, "HOA Police." Marcus raised an eyebrow. "HOA Police? That wasn't a thing, at least not legally." His instinct told him trouble had just arrived. 3 men stepped out of the SUV, dressed in cheap black uniforms. Their shirts were tucked sloppily into their pants, and their plastic-looking badges were pinned crooked on their chests. One even had his cap turned backward like a teenager imitating authority. The leader of the group, a heavy-set man with mirrored aviators, puffed his chest out and barked, "Sir, you are in violation of HOA regulations and are under arrest." For a moment, Marcus simply stared, his grocery bag still in hand. He didn't speak. He just studied them, taking in every detail: the uneven stitching on their patches, the lack of any serial numbers on their supposed badges, and the way they carried themselves. They had none of the discipline of real law enforcement. He finally set the bag down gently on the trunk of his car, straightening his tall frame. "Under arrest," Marcus repeated, his deep voice calm and measured. "By who exactly?" The 3 exchanged glances as if they hadn't expected him to question their authority. The leader cleared his throat, stepping forward. He pulled out what looked like a badge, but Marcus didn't need more than a glance to recognize it for what it was: a piece of cheap metal from a novelty shop. "HOA Enforcement Division," the man announced, trying to sound official. "We've received multiple complaints about your activities. You're coming with us." Marcus almost laughed. Instead, he narrowed his eyes, keeping his face unreadable. "Interesting. I've lived here for 3 years. Not once have I heard of an HOA police force. And trust me, I would know if one existed." His words hung heavy in the air. The men shifted uncomfortably, but one of them, a wiry man with nervous eyes, snapped back, "Don't play smart. You either cooperate, or we'll have to use force." From the corner of his eye, Marcus noticed blinds shifting in nearby homes. Neighbors were peeking out, curious about the commotion. One young woman across the street even raised her phone, recording discreetly from her porch. The fake officers didn't seem to notice, or didn't care. Marcus folded his arms across his chest. His posture wasn't defensive, it was commanding, like a man who wasn't remotely intimidated. "You boys should rethink what you're doing," he said softly, almost like a warning. "Because you're playing a very dangerous game." The heavy-set leader sneered. "The only one in danger here is you." Marcus tilted his head slightly, studying the man's reflection in those mirrored glasses. He could see his own calm expression staring back. He decided to test them further. "What's the charge?" "Leaving my trash can out too long. Parking too close to the curb." His voice dripped with quiet sarcasm. The wiry one blurted, "Non-compliance. Multiple counts." "Non-compliance," Marcus repeated, shaking his head slowly. He almost smiled, but there was no humor in it. "That's not a crime. Not even under your little homeowners association bylaws." The leader's jaw tightened, clearly frustrated. He took a step closer, pointing a stubby finger at Marcus's chest. "You think this is a joke? We can make your life very difficult." For the first time, Marcus allowed a flicker of amusement to cross his face. "You have no idea how difficult life can get," he murmured, voice so low it sent an involuntary chill through them. The 3 imposters exchanged nervous glances again. Something about this man wasn't adding up. He wasn't scared, wasn't flustered. Instead, he exuded the kind of unshakable calm they'd only seen in people who had faced far worse than this suburban charade. Inside, Marcus's instincts were already at work. He could smell the desperation rolling off them, sense the sloppy planning behind this stunt. And beneath his composed exterior, a storm of amusement and cold calculation brewed. The HOA had been looking for ways to push him out of the neighborhood for months. They hated that he refused to bow to their arbitrary rules, hated even more that he stood his ground against them. But this This ridiculous display of authority was new. And it crossed a line. Marcus stood taller, his voice like steel when he finally spoke again. You boys picked the wrong driveway. The silence that followed was thick, broken only by the sound of cicadas in the summer heat. The imposters didn't know it yet, but they had just stepped into a fire they couldn't hope to control. The air grew taut, heavy with tension, as the three so-called HOA officers squared up against Marcus Hayes. The leader adjusted his mirrored sunglasses, trying to reassert control, but the bravado in his stance couldn't hide the nervous twitch in his jaw. He jabbed a finger toward Marcus again, voice sharp. Hands where I can see them. Don't make this harder than it has to be. Marcus didn't move. His calmness wasn't passive, it was deliberate. Every muscle in his body stayed loose but ready, a coiled spring disguised beneath a casual posture. He knew the type of men standing in front of him, bullies puffing their chests in borrowed authority, trying to convince themselves they were in charge. One of the imposters, the wiry man with jittery hands, yanked a plastic baton from his belt. It rattled as he pulled it free, betraying its cheap make. He waved it clumsily, stepping forward. Last chance, he barked, though his voice cracked under the strain. Get down on the ground. Across the street, more blinds shifted. Curtains parted. Phones rose higher. A teenager whispered excitedly to his mother while pointing from their porch. A father quietly ushered his kids back inside, but not before recording a few seconds of video. The neighborhood was watching now, and the fake officers were in too deep to back down without losing face. The wiry one lunged, grabbing for Marcus's wrist, baton raised awkwardly. But Marcus's patience snapped in a flash of movement. His hand shot out, fingers clamping down on the man's wrist with steel precision. In one swift twist, the imposter cried out, the baton clattering uselessly across the driveway. Marcus spun him off balance and released, sending him stumbling back into the SUV with a thud. The entire exchange had lasted less than 2 seconds. Smooth, controlled, tactical. The other two froze, stunned. Their expressions wavered between anger and fear. For the first time, they saw it, the unmistakable way Marcus moved. It wasn't the brawling chaos of an untrained man defending himself. No, this was something sharper, honed. He had the poise of someone who had lived through combat, interrogations, and high-risk takedowns. What the hell? The leader muttered, his voice cracking. Marcus turned his head slowly toward them, his eyes locked and cold. His voice carried no tremor, no hesitation. I gave you a chance to walk away, he said evenly. But you didn't take it. The heavy-set leader tried to muster up authority. He reached for the toy badge again, as if flashing it would suddenly make this nightmare real. You're resisting HOA police orders. That's a federal. Marcus cut him off with a sharp laugh, not of amusement but of contempt. Federal. His tone dripped with disdain. Do you even hear yourselves? The imposters shifted uncomfortably, but the leader doubled down. He yanked at Marcus's arm, attempting to twist it behind his back. Big mistake. Marcus pivoted, stepping sideways in a clean motion, his hand snapping up to catch the leader's wrist. With a smooth rotation, he forced the man off balance, his knees buckling as Marcus locked him in a painful hold. The man's sunglasses fell, skidding across the concrete, exposing wide eyes filled with panic. You don't touch me, Marcus said, his voice low and lethal. Not unless you're ready for what comes next. The wiry man, clutching his sore wrist, scrambled forward again, desperate to regain control. Marcus's eyes flicked toward him, sharp and calculating. He didn't even need to strike. A subtle shift in his stance, the predatory weight in his gaze, stopped the man in his tracks. Silence fell for a heartbeat. Even the cicadas seemed to pause. And then Marcus did something that turned the tide completely. He reached into his back pocket, slowly and deliberately, pulling out his black leather wallet. He flipped it open, revealing a gleaming badge that caught the light of the setting sun. The platinum insignia gleamed with authority that no amount of fakery could imitate, Federal Bureau of Investigation. The imposters, faces drained of color. I'm Special Agent Marcus Hayes, he announced, his voice steady as stone. And you just attempted to impersonate law enforcement and abduct a federal officer. Gasps rippled across the cul-de-sac. Neighbors exchanged wide-eyed looks, whispers spreading like wildfire. The phones that had been recording now caught every word, every glint of that badge. The heavy-set leader swallowed hard, trying to muster a reply. His lips trembled, his voice small. We didn't know. Marcus leaned closer, his hold on the man tightening just enough to make him wince. His eyes were unblinking, his tone a razor's edge. That's your problem. You thought you could intimidate me. You thought I was some ordinary man you could bully. But now, he let the words hang, heavy with promise. Now you've walked into federal territory. The men stood frozen, their fake authority shattered, their future unraveling right there on Marcus's driveway. The neighborhood watched, breathless. They had no idea the quiet man down the street, the one who rarely attended HOA meetings, wasn't just another homeowner. He was something far more dangerous. And for the first time, the imposters realized they weren't the predators in this scene. They were the prey.